go ahead and get started with our talk about Concert and Continua.
Yep.
So we are talking about taking interoperability to the next level. Both of these programs are offered by HIMSS and PCH Alliance.
That's right.
So I want to start out with the agenda, let everybody know what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to do a quick intro to both of these programs. And then I'm going to talk about the Concert program and some of the new things that we're doing in Concert. And then Michael
I'll
Kerwin.
talk about Continua.
Yep. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So we'll go ahead.
Yeah, I can talk to this. So since we both are part of HIMSS, Concert and Continua, really, we're both actual employees of HIMSS, and we're trying to drive certification and interoperability. So the slide that is up here is not everything that HIMSS or PCH Alliance do, but on the interoperability side, it is what we're trying to get done. And so you can see you have the healthcare maturity continuum in the middle, and this is you, the person, right? You're either a patient or a person, may have a connected health device or whatever. But at the top, PCH Alliance is trying to drive Continuous Certified. And we also have another program now called Continua Compliant that was announced today. And so you are the person and you want to be informed. Well, Personal Connected Health Alliance really tries to drive that with a lot of the work that they do in publications, in their thought leadership, and other things that they do to hold events and really try to get the person represented within outside of the walls of a clinical environment, if you will. And so we're trying to help make them get prepared and have them patient-driven, patient-empowered, and the personal aspect. Whereas on the clinician side, and you're welcome to talk to this if you want.
Go ahead.
Or I can. So it's about in the walls of a clinical environment. And so really, they're working with the clinician themselves. HIMSS is. That's what we're all here today, this week doing. But Concert is driving, much of what you're going to learn here is driving that on the inside. But together, we both use many of the same protocols, and that's the whole idea. So that by the time you have your data that goes from, whether it's in a clinical environment or outside, it provides the doctor with the right information that he trusts and that they can act on right away. And ultimately, holistic care. And so power-driven, provider-driven healthcare system aspect and clinical aspect, and all to better outcomes.
Yep, perfect, thank you. So I'm going to do a couple more slides that speak to kind of both Concert and Continua, and then I'm going to dive into Concert. So for those of you that are not familiar with these specific references that are up on the screen, 17025 is going to be for testing, and 17065 is going to be around the certification. And so this diagram was created to kind of show, use a legend to see, which program is being referenced. And then you can look at their degree of certification that they provide, as well as their degree of testing that they provide. And so if we focus on the two that we're talking about today, you'll see that continuous certification's in the green and Concert's in the teal. And then you can see in reference to the other offerings that are out in this space as well. So it's a really great visual to kind of comprehend the programs are in this space and what degree of testing and certification they're offering. So some of the opportunities for private sector engagement, right? So for Concert, we're talking about IHE, HIMSS, and EHR, HIE Interoperability Workgroup. That's the IWG. So Concert, the work done by IWG is what is the foundation for Concert. And we're doing more, we have direct, but we're doing more than direct, and we're doing more than just EHRs. And I'll get into all of this in more detail later as well. Last year at HIMSS 17, we announced our additional certification program for medical devices, so that was a big announcement. But as Michael was saying earlier, it's within the confines, within the walls of the hospital. So it's a key distinction. And then for Continua, we have, of course, it's PCH Alliance. It's a joint program as well, and then focuses on medical devices, and Michael's going to go into much more detail than I'm going to pretend to. So a few more opportunities for the private sector engagement. So some of the feedback to help shape testing and certification. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today is program just recently released a program document, and that really lays out the foundation work for to describe the exact testing that is going on inside our program. And it also describes how the authorized test lab, the ATL, and the accreditation body work with us in our program. And again, I'll get into more of that as well. So that kind of wraps up our intro to both of these, joint intro. And so now we'll move directly into just the concert aspect of this. And so my name is Jim Coates, and I, again, work for HIMSS. I'm the technical project manager for concert, as well as a few other projects as well. So as I was mentioning earlier, concert is work that was done by the IWG, which is the Interoperability Work Group. And then they combine that with HIMSS, of course, and then Stella Technologies. Stella Technologies is a group that built our test tool that we're still using and leveraging today. It leverages both of those standards that we talked about before, the 17025 and 17065 for testing and certification. And it is a comprehensive program that does provide that stamp of approval to say that these products were tested and passed the testing that, again, I'll dive into. So we have 4 distinct seals, and those seals are our certification seals. So we have EHRs, HIEs, HISP, which is Health Information Service Providers, and then, as I mentioned last year, we announced the release of medical devices. And some people, from time to time will get the question about, well, what's different between what ONC is doing and what Concert is doing? So I kind of wanted to touch on this a little bit. With the ONC certification, it's a lot of view, download, and transmit, and then the secure messaging. When they first started their certification program, those were the areas that they were focusing on. Concert, on the other hand, though, is looking at testing and certifying the actual exchange, so the send and receive of information. And we're doing that using IHE profiles. So IHE is integrating the healthcare enterprise. If you would like to learn more about IHE, they do have a table over there. You can stop by and talk to them. But a lot of the use cases here that is sharing information in their demonstrations are leveraging those IHE profiles. The specific ones that Concert is focused on is here. So it's the profile as well as the actor. So I'll talk a little bit about the test tool. And again, that test tool is built by Stella Technologies. It is a web-based online cloud platform. The unique thing about this is it does provide a practice mode. So if a vendor wanted to sign up for testing through the Concert program, they would get access to this test tool, and they would get it through a practice mode. And so that vendor would be able to test their product against our tool until they felt comfortable with the test and know that the outcome, the anticipated outcome. And then what we'll do is we'll sign a test lab to monitor the actual testing. So we'll switch it from practice mode over to certification mode, assign a test proctor, and they will actually view the tests that are happening while the vendor is testing. So that's a little bit about the test tools. It does have a great user interface. The test management in the test tool is excellent, and it provides detailed summary results. This is a high-level architecture of the test tool. As I mentioned, we do have an API layer. So the web UI is that test management platform, and then it goes through the API layer to access the data as well as the tests that are being executed. So I just kind of wanted to put this up here. I don't want to go into too much technical detail, but given that this is inside the interoperability showcase, I wanted to get down in the weeds just a bit. So I wanted to provide a little bit more information. So we'll go into each one of the seals and what we're doing and looking at. So these are the different things that we're testing for the EHRs. And so if a EHR vendor wanted to come to Concert to be tested and certified, these are the type of IHE profiles and the actors that we are testing for. PICS, both the consumer and the patient source, PDQ, direct, so direct messaging is also involved, so it's not just IHE profiles, primarily it is, but we are also doing direct messaging as well. And then the cross-document exchange as well. For IHEs, this is our largest lift for the vendors, and so let me also be very clear, right? We are not testing HIEs, we are testing the products that the HIEs are using. I always want to make that distinction pretty clear, because when people think, oh, you're testing HIEs, we're not. We're just testing the products that they're leveraging. And in there, as you can imagine, with it being in an HIE, so from the EHR side, we're testing the PICS source, but for HIEs, we're testing the PICS manager, which makes sense. PDQ, XDS as well, and then XCA, so the cross community initiating gateway, are the IHE profiles. Again, for the HIE testing of those vendor products, there are 284 tests that they have to go through. So it's rather extensive and robust. HISP is again the health information service provider. We're hitting these 3 different IHE profiles as well as direct. And for the medical devices, right now we are focused on infusion pumps, but we do have the opportunity to expand as we grow the program. But when people hear and see medical devices, they always want to know more and exactly what we're doing. And so these again are the IHE profiles that we're leveraging when we're testing the medical devices and infusion pumps. So that's kind of the high level overview of the Concert program. That's kind of the pitch that I normally give. And then, as I mentioned just recently, we've put together the program document. And so I'm going to run through a little bit about that. The program document was available for public comment. That comment period has since closed. We are currently working through all those comments. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think we received around 40 to 50 different comments, and they ranged from grammatical to actual content that we need to change. So it was a range of comments that we received back. And we are currently working through those to either address the commenter's concern or make changes within the document. So that's a work in progress. But I want to provide a high-level overview of this document, what's contained in it, because once we get the comments worked in and we'll put it back out, we're going to revisit it from time to time. And so there may be another opportunity for additional comments into the future as well. So the program document, it provides a foundation, and primarily it's going to be around the ATLs and the ACBs. So those are your test labs and your certification bodies, and how those 2 different groups would work with the Concert program. It also does dive into the technical details. So if you wanted to get very, very specific on the technical tests that are being executed, the test methods, the test procedures, if it's not contained within this exact document, it references another one that does have those exact specifications on exactly what we're testing, exactly what we're looking for. The rough draft, if you will, is available on our website. So, and I say that because, again, we're open for public comments. We got comments. We're working on integrating those comments, so the document could change. But if you are interested in it, it is available on our website. If you look at Concert by HIMSS, it'll direct you to the website, and there will be a link to download the document if you'd like to look through it. So it does have 3 different parts. So I have 3 slides on each part that I'm going to go through real quick. And so the introduction, as you would imagine, it talks about the program organization, the governance, and the scope. So the concert program does have an advisory committee, and if anybody's familiar with HIMSS, HIMSS committees are volunteer-based. There's an application process. It's very well run, very tough selection process that we go through. The Concert by HIMSS Advisory Committee is a formal HIMSS committee, and so they're our governing body. Underneath that committee is we stand up a technical committee, or technical work group, excuse me. The technical work group is stood up by the committee, and so we do the work. We are addressing those public comments, and then we send our recommendations back up to the advisory committee for them to review and sign off on. Section 2 talks about establishment and maintenance of testing and the certification scheme criteria. There's additional pieces of information in there for approved accreditor, the ATL and the ACB. So for each one of those, there's process for the accreditation and the rules for proper conduct. And then, of course, in the Section 2, we have the certifications that we're offering, which are those 4 seals that I talked about earlier. The Section 1, we start diving, it's like an onion, right? So we dive the next layer deeper. It talks about operational behaviors, the purpose of the program, again, that organization and governance that I talked about with the HIMSS committee and the technical work group that we stood up underneath of it. And then it also has a section in there on the ATLs and the ACBs for their accreditation at a high level. Section 2 has 4 different parts that you can see here. Part A is the more general provisions. Part B talks about the standards and the implementation specifications. Part C is going to be all the technical details. So all the test methods, all the test procedures, a little bit about the test tool. What else am I forgetting? The actors, the steps, the data that's involved. It's very, very technical. So if you're wondering, if you are interested in signing up for concert, want to know what you're going to be tested against, that's the location that you're going to find it. Again, we do have a document that links out. There are 4 additional documents for each one of the seals that goes to the next layer down as well. And then Part D is a extensive section in the document as well, and it covers a ton of information. Detailed information on the ATL and ACBs as far as their status and their proper conduct. We dive into surveillance around the certifications. If there are complaints around certification. So really this document provides a ton of structure to our program. So if anything were to come up, we already have that framework spelled out. Now I'll turn it over to Michael.
Okay. All right, so we, over the last year, have also rebuilt our certification program. So we took all the good that we had in the past, but the idea was really to make that certification program a globally recognized certification program. So some of what Continua, well, first I'll talk a little bit about PCH Alliance and Continua, but what we'll be telling you today is very similar to what the program document from Concert. We've got a new CAS by Continua document. It stands for Conformity Assessment Scheme by Continua. And some of the activities that we've been involved with, with regulatory agencies and Eurocast, for example, in Europe, we'll talk a little bit more about those. But these are some of the ways that we've learned to benchmark the interoperability program. Sorry, the certification program. So PCH Alliance formed a few years ago. It's been within HIMSS for quite a while. What they do is personal connected health. And so they have a flagship event in October. It's in Boston this year. It was in Boston last year. Anyway, in that event, it's much smaller than this event, but growing every year. So it's made up of companies in the personal connected health space. And so we also do a ton of research. We're trying to get evidence. That'll come up. It's coming up right now during this event. Innovations and opportunities in connected health. It was formerly the mHealth Summit, if you remember that, a few years back. And just a lot of presentations, a lot of other things like you're seeing here. at HIMSS. And then Continua, they publish the Continua Design Guidelines. So they're a technical organization really trying to drive personal connected health. And what I'll show you is how we've done that within the guidelines. But we released a new set of guidelines last December. And so that new set of guidelines includes the fire, HL7 fire. And we profiled fire in both Continua for remote patient monitoring, personal connected health, and then also an implementation guideline within HL7. So we have a certification program, which we'll talk about on the compliance side. But the Continua Design Guidelines specify an end-to-end ICT framework for personal connected health solutions based on recognized open standards to create a secure and interoperable health exchange. They enable the secure flow of medical-grade data among sensors, gateways, and services by providing clear guidance on their interoperability by adding the necessary missing features within the underlying standards. And what I mean by that, for example, is we have both devices and we have services. And so what we're trying to do is get the health, medical, and fitness sensor data device from the device all the way into a service, which is the cloud. And so Bluetooth, for example, and I pick on them a lot, it's not perfect. It has way too much optionality in it, right? There's no way any two different products could ever be interoperable because of that optionality. But what we do for the guidelines is we profile that. We do gap analysis and look really closely at the optionality, and we take that optionality out for remote patient monitoring and then tie it down to one default configuration that you would have in every type of blood pressure cuff, so that that blood pressure cuff would work with any gateway, any mobile device, and still work. It could still have additional optionality in it. It would just revert to another configuration that the gateway and the device understood. And the same is true for all different device specs, all different types of devices. So our key goals are really to build our membership. Once we have a good critical mass of members, we think that we can drive the industry a little bit better. Also want to build confidence in the guidelines. And so we built this over 12 years now. More and more people are starting to adopt it. We're hearing more about it every year within HIMSS, also the Connected Health Conference. I think we're really starting to get some progress. And you've heard echoed in this event the problem with interoperability, right? There isn't any. Everybody's doing stuff in their own silos. Well, in order to get big data and to really make machine learning and AI work, you've got to have the data come from a normalized standards, if you will. So the Continua is the only one out there that does it outside the environment of the clinical environment. And then lastly, I didn't say that, but we want to build certified devices. I'll talk about another program here. So this is just a little bit more about our technical vision, but we talk about medical grade interoperability. And I think I have a slide that explains all of that, but it's quite wordy, and I don't want to read all of this. But medical grade interoperability for a remote monitoring device is a device that you're carrying around with you, right? That has maybe a constrained device, it has battery, sometimes coin cell batteries, has sometimes a user interface, whatever. But the problem of going across different time zones or localization, you have all these problems with devices. Well, the data in that device, if it's not contiguous, then it's not accepted generally by any organization as valid data. They throw it out. So what we've done is we've gone and said, well, okay, timestamps, nobody's doing that the same way. We set a guideline for timestamps in our Continua Design Guidelines. We also talk about user interface, pairing issues that we have with Bluetooth, for example. Continua pairs those down, makes certain that they'll work. Connectivity, signal loss, all sorts of things. That's what Continua is there for, to make sure that that device works out in the industry, out in the market. So this is what we built. And I'll read some of these off, but right now there are 26 different protocols, and they all are sensor protocols, 40 different types of sensors or more that represent, hundreds of different types of products that could potentially be certified. and/or now with the Continua compliant program could be compliant with Continua. I'll talk about that in a minute here. But pulse oximeter, ECG, blood pressure cuff thermometer, weighing scale, glucose meter, INR, that's blood coagulation, insulin pump, body comp analyzer, peak expiratory flow monitor, power status monitor, that's battery management, continuous glucose monitoring, cardiovascular fitness and activity monitoring, strength and fitness equipment, independent living activity hub, and medication monitor. And then on the right, we also bring in Bluetooth Low Energy. Bluetooth Low Energy is a totally different animal in a way, but we've made sure that for remote patient monitor, they map to the same nomenclature and term codes that is used in Continua. And so also you see down, we accept all these different transports. So Bluetooth Classic, which is basic rate or extended data rate, USB, Zigbee, NFC, and then also Bluetooth LE there. So all of those transports are in our test tool as well. So here's what we've achieved. So we now have, over the last 12 years, been really focused on chronic illness and also on health and fitness. And so now, with the latest guidelines, we completed all of the diabetes care, so insulin pump, glucose meter, and continuous glucose meter. Heart failure, same thing, hypertension, COPD, health and fitness, we've had those for quite a while now. And we're looking in the future for several others. So you can maybe see home health environmental ventilator in the next year or so. But we're also doing other things to our guidelines that really make it, much more confident and with security and reliability and all that. So this is our architecture. And basically, it's the devices to gateways out into services, right? So that on the right, that's the cloud. And on the left, that's, a device to a mobile phone, if you will. And these are the standards in the middle that we recognize, same standards that IHE recognizes in many cases. But we also do what's called the health and fitness server, gives you the ability to send data over FHIR, if you will. And then also health information service, which we're adding FHIR to that later, but that gets it into a personal health record through a CDA, an EMR, National Health Information Network, or personal health record. So the key thing here is how it's structured is H.810 really stands for H.810 series, and that is the ITUs. We actually give our guidelines over to the ITU, and every year they consent those guidelines, and they rename it into what they call the H.810 series. And so right now we've given all of our specs for continuous design guidelines, but also all of our test suites. And they don't convert those into 6 different languages like they do the continuous design guidelines, but they provide them freely for everybody, so you can all be compliant. So what have we done? In the last year, we've really been trying to open up the program. Before, you had to be a member, and you had to get access, one, to guidelines, and then also to the test tool. Now, no longer. You get both the guidelines and the test tool very inexpensively. If you want to take and go through certification, we require that you be a member, but the cost to go through certification is quite small. So $1,500 to join. It's called the adopter member. We have other levels of membership that are higher, but allow you to do other things and maybe get involved and be more influential in some of the digital health, the connected health stuff that we're doing. But if you're not ready to certify and you don't want to join, totally free. You download the test tool. You can get it today, and then you run the test. Make sure that you can pass, and if you pass, you send us a self-declaration, and you're listed. It's that simple. All right. So this is what we've tried to do is build for our certification program, very similar to the program document, a new document called the Conformity Assessment Scheme by Continua. So it really highlights the role of the healthcare ecosystem for its value, also the governance and for viability and quality, conformity assessment and development for transparency, conformity assessment execution for uniformity, Continua compliant, which I just talked about, the self-declaration, to grow and illuminate the ecosystem, and certification for third-party assurances. So it's also aligned with Eurocast. So what Eurocast is, in Europe, they have a 2-year program where they're developing a global scheme. They're actually looking bigger than just Europe, but right now developing a scheme for conformity assessment in connected health. And so we have been involved with that. We're one of the partners in there and helping drive it. Right now, he's sitting back there right now, our technical director, Tom Erickson. So he's been attending those meetings and driving progress with the actual conformity Eurocast schemes. So we want to accelerate the commercial adoption of products that employ the Continua interfaces to support ubiquitous delivery of Continua device data into clinical health systems. The status right now is execution and deployment framework with FHIR is complete. The test framework to support continuous build environment has been started. The RFP being let for Gateway FHIR Observation Uploader. If you have any questions, please ask us. We also have a table at the Discovery Center there. RFIs let the PhD in the Health Information Service interfaces and questionnaires and response. And the pace of development constrained by available resources. So, as always, there's always the resources that kind of slow or regulate the progress. And what I wanted to show here is really the problem that we face. And I talked about it a little bit earlier about our biggest challenge is really getting everybody to adopt these standards, right? Doesn't matter if it's IHE or Continua or any other standard, well-known adopted standard, that which is in ONC, recognized within the Federal Register for the FDA or any other regulatory agency throughout the world is building a catalog of interoperable standards. What's key here is both inside of HIMSS, we have both the conformance program and the certification and compliance program. And that really helps because it gives you the tools to help accelerate your product to market. And another thing that we're going to do, and I don't know if I talk about it, but we call it Code for Healthcare. It's another thing that we've been doing, and over the last year and a half, we produced the first few phases of that. It's available to members right now, but the whole idea is to get that into open source here in the future. But because of this problem, we're accentuating it as much as possible. And then this is a slide, I'm not going to read it, but it talks about what I mentioned on what is medical grade. But the main point I want you to know here is if you're developing products, whether a device or a service, start thinking medical grade first, all right? Medical grade really means you're looking at those adopted standards that are really coming up in the world, and if you adopt them first, and you won't make the mistake later because you have to take a consumer grade product and turn it into a medical grade product. So, all right. And we've had a lot of global demand, even recently in Catalonia, where they are now mandating glucose meters be certified to Continua. Mandating, not just saying compliance. So we have several, 6 companies within the tender that were selected, I guess, for a pilot, and for $50 million even, so it wasn't small, that are they're going through certification right now. We're working with them all. But we've also had success in all these other countries as well. I don't mention China and or Singapore or Japan. They are also starting to come back, seeing reimbursement in Japan, seeing reimbursement in the U.S., also seeing in China adoption of the continuous standards, that which is health and fitness actually. This is a little bit about our architecture, which you saw a slide before, but some of the things that we're doing. And so in 2017, we really went one way, by one direction, so getting the device data all the way to, let's say, the EHR. But this year we're working on what's called command and control. And command and control is trying to get that data back. But we got to fix a few things first. One, security, cybersecurity. So we're working on that. 2, we also got to really be thinking about what we're doing for our IoT. And so that's another thing that we're working on very heavily this year because with a new use case called direct to cloud.
One thing that I forgot to mention while I was talking, our test tool, with it being the cloud-based system, so if we are testing an EHR vendor product, for example, our tool acts like or plays the part of the HIE. So the system under test, which is an EHR, would send the information to our test tool that acts like an HIE. They would make sure it's formatted correctly. They would be able to receive the information, and then they would send information back to the system under test and make sure that EHR is able to accept that information as well. So it really truly is sending and receiving information, what we're testing and certifying. And our test tool is what allows that to happen. Thank you. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, as I mentioned earlier, both Michael and I have tables in the Discovery Center. So if you're in that area, I'm over by the orange board, if you will, and the Continua table is over with the green
right
area. So please stop by. We have additional information at each of our tables. We'd be happy to talk as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, good job.